Corinne, did you want to expound a little bit on on what we ended on prior to the break?
Yes, you had questioned me if I change states of consciousness was when I'm in contact with higher consciousness, other beings. I think the easiest way is just to call it higher consciousness because they are of a higher vibration, and to me, basically, that means that they know more than I do, and that they are benevolent, loving, and that they're only here to help. So again, I do shift consciousness, but as a child, I had a very difficult childhood, sleep paralysis and an abusive childhood. So day and night, I was terrorized, so to speak. And it is proven in research that the more terrorized you are, the more DMT you develop, the more open your third eye. So having those pressures on me day and night, my third eye developed, and I've always seen. When I was so I'm not your average bear, I suppose.
You talked about the entity that you encountered, the shadow being. Now, you've indicated that the entities that you communicate with are of a higher dimension. They are more knowledgeable, more spiritual, and that they come to bring goodness to your life and to bring these sorts of things. But
Some call them ascended masters, the great philosophers, the great teachers, the great White Lodge. There are many names.
But in the other hand, you indicated that there are these other forces at work here as well. And
Yes, and if you are psychologically or emotionally damaged, then you are open to those frequencies.
so we do need to be cautious that we are not getting attached to something that is not going to be bringing such good things into our lives.
It's all a matter of the virtues of a human being, telling the truth all the time, sending and trying to be loving instead of codependent, where you're trying to control everyone's life. Again, John Bradshaw. So you've got to catch your own patterns. And many people are so good that they become martyrs. And they follow the difficulty of Jesus' life without the insight Jesus had.
They just sort of lay down and let it happen.
Well, actually, they're involved in their own flatulation. You see, this is the drama trauma.
They do it to themselves. Yeah.
Indeed, they choose to, but they're kind of blind to it because, again, we are our best tricksters. And so what I think the first step is, like the first step in 12 steps, is to accept or realize in your own special way that there is something bigger than you that loves you beyond measure. However you define that, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so just a word of caution again, and I don't think it's overstating it to let people know that you really do need to work on your inner state, and you really do need to be aware of the negative aspects of yourself. And whenever you decide to move in a direction and to move outside, to seek connection with outside entities or forces or whatever you want to call them, higher consciousness, etc., that you need to do that with intention, with positive intention, and also with the greatest human examples that you can, and that is of life and love and joy and things of this nature. And I don't think it would be possible, at least in my particular experience, I think it would be rather difficult for a negative entity to worm its way into your life disguised as something wonderful and nice, because it would eventually give itself away. Uh,
That's true, but that's an eventuality. Just like, the rough biker type can come into our life and we're like, oh my gosh, he's so much fun. And then we find out, okay, he's not virtuous. And I don't mean to pick on bikers. I'm so sorry. I'm just looking for an archetype. He's not virtuous. He's not consistent. And he's, not giving his heart to me. So the relationship with spirit, or whatever you want to call it, is going to reflect just like the relationships you have in your life. So if your relationships are dysfunctional,
mm,
there will be dysfunctional spiritually as well, because you are seeing through a glass darkly. You are not seeing the truth.
okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. That makes sense. So that's good advice there. Um, then perhaps you can point us in a direction of some tools that people can access, whether they be writings of people or places that we can go in order to find out more about developing ourselves spiritually, preparing ourselves, and being able to explore some of these different forms of consciousness, and perhaps reaching out and expanding ourselves in that way.
Indeed. I believe in superheroes and I believe in mythology. And for that matter, I believe in Disney. Because when I watch a Disney movie, they bring out the virtuous qualities, right? The sword of truth and the shield of virtue. All of these things are woven into our mythology, and modern day we have Disney mythology. If you're watching with the eyes to see and ears to hear, then you're going to get all the magic and wonderment out of it. And I think that movies can be great teachers. But the first thing I think you need to do is just literally make a commitment to yourself, because you must be your best friend and you must be your confidant. And that's the most important choice I think any of us will ever make, is that we are the most important person to us. And once we do that, we are guided on how to nurture ourselves, even through diet. It hits all levels. And we can take care of what I like to call my animal body, because I feel like, people fight for the rights of tigers and penguins and all that. I own this animal body. I am this flesh. And so really just starting on focusing on what you can see, which is your body, and changing your diet and nurturing yourself is going to bring upon a spiritual awakening.
So would you say that means that we also need to be truthful with ourselves and also acknowledge the entire spectrum of who we are?
Yes, and that's what a lot of people like to call shadow work. Carl Jung really drove that home, the shadow. I think he described it wonderfully. It is the dark nature of man. If you're polarized, then you can see it as the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other. And I feel that because we have taken on animal bodies as souls, we have kind of an animal karma. And that is to become one with the animal as a spiritual being, and then the animal is transformed, and that's also what they call enlightenment or anointed. So you can do it through the physical form because you will be guided in the higher ways once you are concentrating on yourself emotionally or psychologically or physically. Any of those paths are going to lead you up to the light.
Okay, so there are many different routes that people can take.
Yes, and
Ideally,
it's
I
really
guess
just a commitment to love yourself.
Ideally, I guess the best thing would be to incorporate all of those things at some point, but I imagine that not
If you got
everybody.
the time for it.
Yeah, right. Not everybody can do that. So, and
We want to keep it simple, stupid.
right. And I guess we're talking about something that is an actual commitment here. We're not talking about something that you can do like on a weekend. And
Oh no, well, you can do this on the toilet. Really, just say, I love myself. I'm a sovereign being. I want to learn. That's really a statement, you know? And that leads, it's a domino effect. You can start as small as you like.
then just keep adding on from there.
You will be guided. And then that's the thing. Are you going to listen to your guidance? Are you going to listen to your inner guidance system? Or, are you going to go back in your negative patterns because it's just too darn hard?
Yeah. And as I don't know who described it this way, but I think it was probably one of the best statements anybody ever said is like that we have that tape recorder in our head that replays the same scenario over and over and over again. And if it's something that you constantly fail at, or something that is a constant burr in your side, as it were, that anytime you come upon the conflict or whatever that produces that particular result, the tape player just starts playing again, and that just
And that's a form of programming. And a lot of
Yeah.
your listeners will know about mind control. Well, guess what? We do it to ourselves, too, as well.
Yes, we do. Imposed outside as well as in. Very true, and we're very good at that ourselves. So, if you, if you think that maybe somebody's beaming a beam into your head from somewhere, maybe you ought to think about what you're doing to your own head before you go looking outside to figure out where that's coming from. Because
That's an excellent point. Thank you.
yeah, I think that's a really good thing for people to think about. But since you're a psychic, let me just throw in here and say, what do you think's going to happen with the election this year?
Oh my gosh, the election, that is like the last thing on my mind. I see the entire governmental system as something that is global and United Nations related.
So that's where we're headed.
I see the New World Order, and I have for years, and I would like to make a point that I do not call them Illuminati, because where I come from, Illuminati means illuminated, enlightened, loving beings, and it's just like Hitler took the swastika and turned it sideways. That was an ancient Hindu symbol. Just like the Satanists took the pentacle and turned it upside down. These are bastardizations of ancient, beautiful symbols. So I would like to point out that I'm using Illuminati as a pride word.
So we want to take it back, in other words.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
make it have its real meaning, and that is
Yeah.
to be illuminated and to be focused on, illumination, spiritual enlightenment, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Whereas,
So when anyone's talking about reptiles or Alex Jones or whatever, I say New World Order. In
okay.
Bohemian Grove.
So whatever happens, you see the advance in the march of the same thing that we've been seeing over the last, whatever it is.
As a spiritual being who has had the visions of the future, I can say that I believe that the Mayans did say we're going to have a new beginning, and I believe the alignments of astrology is saying new beginning, and I've spoken, I better not say that. I speak with Yeshua, Jesus, and he says, yes, honey, I'm coming back through everyone, and it's going to be blissful. So I can't put a time period on that, but I believe that our future is very bright. But right now we see the end of the Kali Yuga, which is this great polarity, and I believe we will see the world as black and white, and that's just what we have to go through.
So no matter what happens, I mean, even if we do have a spiritual awakening, as many people have thought, Corinne, and a lot of people are certainly talking about it, that there seems to be a quickening that is going on in the world today that is turning people to the idea of advancing consciousness, and this is such a huge topic with people today. And about
and it was back with the hippies. They were the first big wave. And now we're seeing that wave again.
Yes, and maybe this time it'll actually make it to the shore and crash
Well, we're
onto the
through
shore.
the sexual revolution. That was their downfall. We don't have to be victims of that anymore.
Indeed, but certainly are roadblocks in the way of this, and I think people need to be aware of that as well.
And that's your job, and that's what you do.
Well, that's what I try to do. Hopefully, I do a good job of it. Um, but first step is to get in touch with ourselves and to love
Let's make a
ourselves as who we
commitment.
are,
Yeah.
and make a
Yeah.
commitment to advancing ourselves. What would be the next step?
I was born spiritual, so I don't know how to tell those people who don't believe in a higher being. I don't know how to guide them. All I can say is I believe there's something much bigger than us that loves us beyond measure. And if you can get that into your head, even if it's not something you can prove, it's going to improve you.
So people who are completely unspiritual, um, or just completely want to reject that notion, um,
Well, see,
it's hard for.
psychologically, we have to become our own parent, our own loving parent. And then when I did that in my life, I became my own loving parent. Then I got loving spiritual parents that came along with that.
Well, that makes sense. So you're saying that whenever we get things in order with our own physical being living in the third dimensional reality that we're in right now,
Hmm.
that in a sense that automatically promotes a greater spiritual awareness and pushes us in that direction.
Yes, it's unstoppable.
That is, I think, very true. And I think that whenever we do sort of make that commitment to ourselves and to the advancement of ourselves and to understanding who we are and to actually accepting ourselves for who we are, because let's face
A
it,
big issue is shame. We have
yeah,
shame, and
yes, we
that
do.
toxic shame. And again, John Bradshaw.
Yes. And guilt,
Yes, all of these fictions
yes.
that cause friction, that causes growth. But if you're just in the friction of it and you're not growing, then you're suffering. And that's a really hard place to be in.
It is. And the idea is to actually overcome those things. But it's not to reject
It,
them.
no, not at all. It's to feel your edges, as Pema Children says. She says, feel your edges. Be there with your fears. You know, why do we have to push away all negative experience? Why can't we invite it in and have some coffee with it?
Well, actually, that's a really good way to put it. I mean, if you could sit down and talk to your shame or your
Or your
guilt
shadow.
or your shadow self, yeah, and say, why are you doing this to me? Explain the rationale of it, and you come to terms with it and understand what it's doing to you and what it's trying to teach you.
And that it's not your guilty, shameful fault. It's lessons you needed to learn.
Exactly, and it's a hurdle that we need to step over. And at the same time, incorporating that into ourselves rather than trying to deny it, because denial is another thing that people suffer from a lot of. They
Yeah,
try to,
that is a lack of self-love, denial, because
yeah,
that's the lack of truth.
yeah, they try to pretend like something never happened rather than facing it, confronting it, and dealing with it so that
That's
they
more
can
when you're,
advance.
yeah, when you're in the ego, and the ego to me is the character in your play. When you are your character, when the hat is wearing you, that's not a healthy space.
No, I don't think so. It doesn't sound very good either.
It's the
So,
Ziggy Stardust syndrome.
well, there's a character there.
Yeah.
Yes, David Bowie. Well, I guess the show wouldn't be complete without a David Bowie reference
Well,
of
you
some
know he's
sort.
an alien, right?
Well, yeah, he's the man who fell to Earth. So,
Is there life on Mars?
indeed, and perhaps we could do an entire show on David Bowie himself because he is quite an interesting individual. So, any parting words for us, Corinne, today?
Thank you so much. I am deeply grateful and honored, and bless you all from the deepest part of my heart. Namaste.
Well, I say namaste to you as well, and to thank you for being on the show today. And I'll just do a roundup here and remind everybody that my guest this evening was Corinne Wilson. And she goes by the name Occult Priestess on YouTube. And I strongly encourage you to go over there and look at her many videos and watch them. And you can find out more about advancing your spirituality and getting in touch with higher consciousness. And you can also get in touch with her through her website at occultpriestess.com, where she offers services such as tarot readings and other mystical services. If you're interested in any of those things, definitely go there and check it out. And you can have her work with you personally if you're interested in doing that. And as a final note, I would like to say that I encourage everybody who's listening to think about what we have been talking about today, and not in the airy-fairy, hippy-dippy idea that some people want to paint all of this into as New Age-y, hocus-pocus nonsense, but actually as a very real path of spiritual enlightenment that has a very real-world grounding in our own psychology, our own human understanding, and our own makeup as people. And to look at it from that perspective rather than just looking at it from the airy-fairy thing that a lot of people try to put this in the corner and box it up and say it's all a bunch of bunk.